Hi, welcome back to Future Fast. And once again, we have Bipin with us. And for those of you who are not familiar with him, I sincerely urge you to look up the first part of our conversation where he shares his journey. And it is very interesting, and you will not regret that. And obviously, you are here to hear more and what exactly they're doing. And that's the conversation we are going to have today. And once again, welcome to Future Fast. And if you have not yet subscribed to Future Fast, you should do it right now. And Bipin, once again, thank you so much for being part of Future Fast.
Thank you for having me, Nanjanda. And I must say, I enjoyed the last conversation and all the thought you put in asking me the right questions. So, yes, much appreciated, and I look forward to it.
Wonderful. So we just dive straight into ask you why Iom Bioworks.
So, Iom came about for multiple reasons. Personally, after I moved on from Gaia, a friend introduced me to this whole concept of evolutionary biology and Darwinism via a book, actually, from Dawkins, Richard Dawkins. On one hand, with this, I became fascinated with the whole concept of genetics, actually the P, and there is respect for the humble P, and how the life and its traits, and understanding life and traits and inheritance. Mendel is the one who chronicled it, and he's also credited with applying statistical methods of probability to biological research. In some sense, he was a pioneer. So it was worth, but then not reading further, I also discovered, again, a different view of evolutionary biology thanks to a lady called Lynn Margulis. And her work struck me phenomenally. And, we were talking last time about, or rather earlier, about women and possibly some of them not getting the due credit that they deserve. I really do think women don't get that kind of credit. But Lynn actually co-developed a theory called the Gaia hypothesis, which is what my earlier company was named after. And she also did some fabulous initial work on bacteria and how bacteria shaped our evolution, our lives, and how bacteria continue to do so. So these were, on one hand, I discovered the P and statistical research. And on the other hand, discovered bacteria and how they connected to evolution. And this was, our own work on emergent systems. So this was what I discovered recently. Then it was personal histories. Both mine, I had issues with my gut, and largely caused by what you call a complete erosion of bacteria in my gut because of my medical histories. And when I encountered Samik and Kitano, Samik Ghosh and Hiroaki Kitano, who came with their own personal histories in computational biology and tech, and the principles that they brought forward in tech and in pharma. It was serendipity, and then when we got the initial team of Renuka and Nisha and Tanmay and Kishore and Dinakaran, it all happened. It fell into place. And so that is what Iom happened. That's how Iom happened, actually. So Iom, in some senses, after some audacious goals, audacious but inevitable, because we see how technology is shaping some of these discoveries of what bacteria can do to our health. We said, we are best poised to do it. So we are in a unique position to address this because of the what you call the interdisciplinary expertise that we bring in terms of engineering and computation and understanding pharma and biology. So that's how Iom happened. That's why Iom, in some sense.
And is there a story for why Iom?
So Iom, actually, you mean the name?
Yeah, the name.
So Iom is derived from microbiome, and I must credit a team from our marketing, Sarita, and team for having got the name. From microbiome, it's right in the middle of microbiome. You can't do Iom. You can't create microbiome without Iom. And then, of course, it was some other applying philosophical principles of I, which is me personally, and Om, which is the universal sound of creation. So there's a combination of both. And as an Indo-Japanese company, and the Japanese folks completely empathize is the wrong word, but they're completely involved in some of these concepts. So together, yes, Iom came about.
Okay. And can you make it simpler as what exactly Iom does?
I understand there is some ambiguity about what Iom does. So what Iom does is work on bacteria, on understanding bacteria and what bacteria can do for you. In fact, our purpose and mission that we have enshrined is saying that we will get to better health, even a better planet, by understanding the bacteria. But how do we understand bacteria? I mean, they are like, in micrometers, they call microns in size. So what technology has evolved to is we can do genetic sequencing to understand what is the DNA of the bacteria and therefore what the bacteria is. So on one hand, Iom does genetic sequencing right now of stool samples of you to understand about your gut. We therefore tell you which bacteria is there, how much of these bacteria is there. And on the other hand, we built systems to understand the biochemistry of food. And together, it's a straight match, because these ingredients in the food are what is required by these bacteria or impact these bacteria. So if you want to increase or reduce this bacteria, increase or reduce these food items. As simple as that conceptually is what we do.
Right.
Did I explain that simply and well enough, or?
I think we'll dwell more into it, but maybe so it essentially you take a patient or a customer's stools and study the currently what is done in a lab, right? Currently, the process is that they do a culture of it and they come up with that. So, from that respect, how different is what you're doing? How different is this process from what is currently in practice in across the city? Every city pretty much has these labs, right?
So I'll put it very simply. What DNA sequencing does is gives you the entire spread of bacteria that is there. In fact, there are two methods. One is 16S rRNA, which looks at the different regions of the DNA. In fact, in 16S, we particularly look at certain regions, V3, V4. And we know that this is the entire amount of bacteria that is there in your gut. With culture, what happens is we check for a particular bacteria. That means, do you have this bacteria or not? That's a chemical process, biochemical process, where we test.
So that is where a physician, depending on the condition of the patient, advocates look up for these bacteria in it, and the culture specifically is done to check if that bacteria is there.
That is correct. Whereas with 16S and whole metagenome sequencing,
it's a physician-driven exercise.
Sorry?
That's a physician-driven exercise.
No, this is both can be physician-driven exercises, Nanjendra. It's just that this is because technology is evolved to such a scale where we can do this now. We can do this. It's still a little expensive, but eventually we expect it to, as with everything that is technology, to cost to come down in future. But it is looking at it at the gene level. Previously, to do something at the gene level, I mean, 23 years back, it was phenomenally expensive in terms of a few lakhs, but now it's a few thousands. Whereas cultures, PCR, all that is far more cheaper, and in some sense, both of them have different purposes. Let me put it that. If you want to know the entire spectrum of bacteria, you would do genetic sequencing.
Right. So you don't really see this as a future of replacing this culture exercise currently in vogue in the labs?
At different purposes.
At least from a cost point, not immediately, but otherwise?
See, if you were to say that Nanjunda has got this bacterial infection, you wouldn't do DNA sequencing. You would just go and go to the back of the thing and say, can you check if I have this bacteria? Whereas if I wanted to know a little more about the entire spectrum of bacteria that I have, and it's not just bacteria actually, it's all microbes, microbiome, it's all microbes, then I would say you would do DNA sequencing.
Right. So if just going to that, one of the future predictions, I think it is Kaku, but if it is somebody else, don't hold me for it. But the prediction was that we will have these kind of DNA sequencing devices built into the toilets, so that one goes to the toilet and you get it on your phone. These are the kind of microbes, these are the kind of bacteria, and this is what is predicted from a point of your health. So you got to do this. So
Absolutely.
how far do you see that from where you are today?
In fact, this was right appropriate for my earlier organization and several organizations working. I don't see why this is not possible. I don't see why this is not possible. I don't know when this person, when he wrote the book, and if he mentioned that it could do it at a DNA level or an rRNA level. We can all hope that we would have personal systems to do so. That we wouldn't need to send our stool sample to a lab. But it's not just about stool sample in that sense, Nanjunda. I mean, there is bacteria on our skin. There are bacteria in different areas. There are.
In the book, it was in this context that you go to the toilet, you get it on your phone, and I'm kind of familiar that we are basically a sophisticated identity for millions of bacteria.
Right? Absolutely, and which is where the opportunity for Iom Bioworks came in, right? I mean, if there are so many cells, bacterial cells, then and which is the approximate numbers are 30 trillion human cells and about 39 trillion bacterial cells, in the ratio of 1:2, therefore 1.1, whatever. But bacterial cells more. So the opportunity space that we are looking at is saying that if there are so many bacterial cells, why aren't we looking at how it is that they cause illness or diseases, and therefore how can we modulate them to get better health? Really, I mean,
right.
The gut is where a lot of the things. A lot of there is the gut-brain axis. There is the the gut kidney, gut liver. There's even the gut bone now, saying that how research papers have just been published about how having some bacteria actually impact bone density and bone strength. What I'm getting to is it's not just about having these. It's about applying these concepts and principles to various other aspects and how we can improve health by looking at what bacteria can do.
Tell me, one is that you essentially look at it from what's coming from the gut. But correct me if I'm wrong, that every food that we take in, right? I mean, they go through a life cycle, right? I mean, a fruit itself, right? I mean, from the time it's plucked, in the process of it ripening, it goes through various cycles, and at different cycles they have different bacteria, which also enriches magnesium and things like that, right? Do you also look at these kind of things in terms of plants? And I mean, of course, if it is cooked, I guess then it perhaps changes a whole lot of it. But much of it is, I mean, if at all there are raw vegetables and fruit, perhaps they have a far more better impact in that sense. But do you also look at what goes into the gut versus what comes out of it from there? I mean, is there some sense of correlation in that that you look for?
There is absolutely. In fact, what goes into the gut is what influences the gut, and therefore the gut bacteria, and therefore the larger aspect of us. So it's definitely connected. It's what goes in, our ecosystem, so to say, our ecosphere, and several other things. These are getting discovered almost on a regular basis. But fundamentally, it is about what goes in.
Does it have a bearing in terms of what is the demography of the customer? As in, see, Indians with the Indian food habit, even if you go a little more microscopic in terms of a
India
South
is
Indian
massive.
or a,
You can't look at India. I mean, there are many. India's diversity is enormous.
yeah. So how do you look at it from a degree of personalization here of their food habits at each level? And also, since this product is global, right? I mean, you're right now catering to the global market, or is it you're testing it out for one
In fact,
region and then?
we are built for the global market. We are building for the global market. Our niche that we have identified, saying that let's address sleep, energy, and stress to begin with. I mean, that's one of our first products. Is aimed at. I mean, we are building the whole tools and the systems, the framework. So, if I may say, to address the global space, and how it works, Nandana, is that, let me use one example in the form of something that we recommend, and I know it has helped me, which is Ajwain. Ajwain has got XYZ chemical compounds. One of them is something called thymol. Thymol is consumed by bacteria X, let's say Akkermansia. And this is what Akkermansia kind of thrives on. It's like a prebiotic for Akkermansia. So if I want to increase Akkermansia, I tell the person, or rather the product tells the person to consume Ajwain because it has got this. This Ajwain, because of its chemical, because how it is, may have a substitute. But the fact that Ajwain has got thymol and thymol is beneficial to this bacteria is a universal rule. Let's assume it is a constant. That it is, and it does not matter. Maybe I can look at a substitute for Ajwain, but the fact that thymol is what helps this bacteria is known, and that is what we suggest, to the person. Depending on the geography the person comes from, whether it is Canada or somewhere else, or even the Middle East, we may change Ajwain for local availability.
Okay.
So at that level, there is personalization. But because that person is Bengali and his gut may be tuned to more Bengali food, that is at one level in terms of we'll give it to him to help him consume it better. But the fact that he needs to have thymol is without doubt a fundamental need is what we would describe.
Right. See, you did mention this is kind of a culmination of deep tech, deep science from
Yes.
coming from even pharmacology and right? But I'm just curious. You didn't mention Ayurvedic or native traditional food and medicine. So, how much of an influence of these things are there in what you're working on?
So I would say in our first product in addressing sleep, energy, anxiety, stress.
Was it deliberate that you didn't mention Ayurvedic? I'm just curious.
Oh, was it deliberate? I don't know. I mean, if it was deliberate. And I like Ayurveda. I mean, in fact, Ajwain that I mentioned is from Ayurveda.
But it's also part of the traditional food, right? I mean, traditionally, if people complain about indigestion, how about I'll give you a bit of Ajwain in buttermilk? I mean, these kind of things have been there, right?
I can be completely open in this podcast. Ayurveda has people who love it and people who completely possibly don't love it. I wouldn't want to use the word test don't love it. And there are people like me who are completely indifferent to it until I actually got into it. I had not even considered Ayurveda until about 3 years ago, when, thanks to this work, I got into it, understood its depth and its width. And I'm absolutely fascinated by how certain things have been in place. I mean, forget about the actual pieces, but the concepts, the conceptual framework, how well they've been laid out in Ayurveda so many millennia ago. So we do like Ayurveda. We do.
But you
believe
didn't mention, is it because you don't use that? I mean, you're just
No, we
personal
use.
interest. Oh, you do? Okay.
That's why, which is what I'm coming in the sleep, energy, and anxiety stress product, which we call Iom Gut Sense. The solution, the solve that we give out to people are a bunch of herbs, which now science calls it as prebiotics, ajwain, soft, jeera, all that. In fact, they've all been described in Ayurveda. But again, we look at it, we are a hardcore, fundamentally trained by training. We're all, I don't even know whether to say Western science, but we've all been schooled in the more modern school of thinking or science, and therefore Ayurveda was never taught to us. Ayurveda has come to us because of interest and because of the impact that it has. But for the team to realize that Ayurveda has this impact, they had to apply Western schools of thought, which is like what I mentioned, right? The whole biochemistry.
No, but see, someone like you who's running a deep tech company with this kind of product, 15 years ago, perhaps would have not even referred to any association of Ayurveda. So I think a lot of things have changed from a point of even openly acknowledging or associating or even talking about following it, right? In that sense. So, but you still feel there are a lot of people who are averse to.
In fact, ironically, it is here in India, the land of Ayurveda, that there is, at least we see resistance from the Western doctors, from the allopaths. And I may be held against this because we work with a bunch of really good allopaths too. But yeah, they have their reasons.
I can't take name, but I met a diabetologist who actually told me in person that he studied Ayurveda. He actually is also an Ayurvedic doctor. He went to Ayurvedic college as well, but he never tells anybody that he has also done Ayurveda. But he uses the knowledge just to recommend the diet. But he says that I can't even say, because with you I can openly talk about it, but professionally, if I talk about it, people will perhaps most of my customers will stop coming to me.
Yeah, and
that's unfortunate.
The unfortunate fallacy that is there in the modern world, and we should accept some of these things that are being handed down to us. Japan, I mean, we are an Indo-Japanese company. The equivalent of Ayurveda in Japan, which is the traditional form of medicine, is called Kampo. And in Japan, the equivalent of an allopath actually has credits or coursework in his academics for studying Kampo, which is the equivalent of Ayurveda. And the first, and it's also covered by insurance, really. So if he gives out medication, he can give out Kampo medication, and it is covered under insurance.
I think Ayush as a department is trying to do this, though. Ayush
is making great strides, but for the IMA to accept elements of Ayush will require
still take
time and a lot of effort. And I would say it is folks like us who are building the equivalent of deep science, so to say, which have looked at the constituents of Ayurveda at a fundamental level and have applied the whole Western scientific method of incorporating these. I would say folks like us actually can make a huge difference to the prevalence, to the justification of why certain things in Ayurveda are useful.
But well, again, very interesting when you say this, because the one argument the traditional medical fraternity from today's context is the Western medicine, right? They always say that Western medicine is data based, right? Data, science, and data based,
trials,
whereas Ayurvedic
repeatability.
has largely been a faith based versus there is not sufficient data to back it up. So when you say you use this and in a deep tech sense, which is predominantly data driven, so how are you bridging that? Where are you getting the data from this aspect?
So, in fact, you can use the same ajwain example that I mentioned. Ajwain is a natural food item. Ajwain, in some sense, exists in Ayurvedic texts. Ajwain is, in some sense, maybe even prescribed in Ayurveda medication. I mean, I could be. I'm not an expert, but I know it is there, and the folks prescribe it. But when we look at ajwain, we look at the chemical components of ajwain, and this is where I give you the example of thymol. And thymol, there is enough data to say how thymol actually helps cholesterol, for example, or certain health areas where an ingredient of thymol, an extract of thymol, can be given for a particular illness. So this is how we are bridging the Ayurveda in. Well, bridging is not the right word. How we are justifying it based on science and data and incorporating it into the solution that we offer.
Oh, wonderful. I think, yeah. I mean, however unfortunate it may sound that one needs to try to justify the impact of it, but that's the way it is. It's the time, and
Very recently I heard somebody say that just because something can't be seen yet by science doesn't mean it's not true or doesn't exist. I would say that's far away. We have science and technology available to do these things that we're doing. I mean, it's simple. I mean, when I say ajwain,
so you just go at a base level, look at the composition, and it becomes much easier to justify that.
I mean, you're showing it scientifically in a scientifically accepted way, right? That this is what it is. This is the biochemistry of the ingredient that is prescribed in Ayurvedic dietary practice, Ayurvedic text, and therefore you need to take it forward. I mean, if you look at it that way, the whole Western world is now going gaga over the effects of curcumin and turmeric, right? And its effects as an antibiotic and all of that. It's not that we didn't know the effects of turmeric. It's just that we couldn't explain it well enough. Now science gives us a method
that has been used as a traditional home medication and
nobody went around to understanding the reasons why it is. But now when you understand the reasons at a fundamental level on why it is, then it takes on a different hue completely, right? And I think we should be able to do that. We have the capabilities to do.
And what are the challenges, the limitations do you see in businesses such as yours who are trying to approach the Ayurvedic or the traditional science-based healthcare applications with deep tech, approaching more from a chemical side? And how do you see in India context, right? How do you see Ayush or these kind of ministry, or I don't know what they actually offer, but are there any support for businesses such as you?
Our bigger challenge is even more impactful, I would say, going by what data we have, which is about bacteria. I mean, Ayurveda at least is something that most people know and have either a strong opinion this way or that way about it. But in terms of bacteria, I mean, our fundamental challenge is to create awareness about the impact of bacteria. I mean, I would say that is a much more a bigger challenge than convincing people about Ayurveda for us. If I may, push that in, and that's what we need to do, and that's what I'm hoping to do by conversations, telling them bacteria has this impact. How we can do it is several ways, and Ayurveda happens to be Ayurvedic dietary practices happen to be a really good way to do so in what we have seen.
And from a point of go-to-market, how do you see your current approach? I think I think your first product is on the sleep. Wow, that's what you mentioned, right? Sleep
We
and
have
what
two
was that?
products. One is called Gut Sense, which is an abbreviation for sleep, energy, stress. And
Sleep, energy, stress. Yeah.
yes, and this is because in our earlier, in our initial research, we saw how bacteria produces some of these biochemicals, so to say, dopamine, serotonin, um, uh, butyrate, propionate. All of these are now attributed to different bacterial fermentation. And when I say fermentation, it means in simple language, these are the things that bacteria produce. So that's how we said let's do this first. We also have a solution on addressing IBS, which is the irritable bowel cysts. IBS by virtue of understanding the bacteria that affect your IBS related constipation and diarrhea and things. These are the two products that we have. Another product that we have is just gives you, we analyze it based on what I mentioned, 16S rRNA or whole metagenome sequencing, and tell you that the bacteria that affect 6 conditions: cardiovascular health, metabolic health, digestive health, um, and 3 more areas actually, um, and how by and how well, how much or how badly they affect vulnerability, so to say, if I may say. So these are the 3 products that we have.
And what kind of compliances are you subjected to, or do we have systems to say this is the way you can, you can't? Is there some kind of a compliance system in place for this kind of healthcare service which employs deep tech and work at a bacterial level? Is there anything like that? Or what standards, if it is
At
not in
the
India,
moment, we are
anywhere else?
working. Actually, we are.
Sorry?
No, there isn't regulation
Well,
in the strict sense of regulation, because what we are doing on one hand is giving you information of the bacterial, and the other is we're not giving you medicines, right? I mean, we don't prescribe medicines. We are suggesting what you call available food to do what is necessary for you. If you were giving you extracts or what come under drugs, then you need uh, then you have to, it falls under regulation and certification and all of that.
no, but also since you have to capture people's very personalized data, such as, and then you further break it down to find it. So, while a lot of rules are still coming in place, right? From that sense, are you
I understand.
proactively putting up some compliances,
We
something
have,
that
in
is
fact, we are
based in
compliant
terms of
with
data protection?
yes, we are compliant with ISO standards for data, ISO 2001 something for data security, for privacy, and we are also working with the folks at ABDM or rather the National Digital Health Mission. We'll be compliant with some of their um, frameworks. We have been talking to folks to put down mechanisms for standards in microbiome measurements. So in all of the sense, we take great care for ensuring privacy and security. Actually.
So, what kind of infrastructure you create even to say that, see, every time you perhaps have to use this data, right, for you to give you that uh, uh, bandwidth of having multiple sources. So, every time you use the data, even if it is smart data, uh, is there any sense of permission seeking? Is there a system in place to say that, okay, your data has been consumed for this effort, but your personal information of identity has been masked. Is there any system
My
like that
team,
in place?
my team will love to address this, and they are hardcore believers in the whole privacy piece. So at a ground level, see, privacy in many ways is about how about systems at a technological level, and it's also about processes.
Right.
So we have laid down both in terms of processes. We when we get in the data in the teams that manage the biological sample don't know whose biological sample it is. It is hard coded. It is coded to that effect, and it's already anonymized. So there is the metadata that comes in. When I say metadata, it is your demographic data, etc. That is only linked to the biological data by virtue of one ID, which almost nobody has unless they come in with the right permissions and security mechanisms.
Right. But
And
even that as anonymous data, does the user get to know every time that it has been employed to arrive at anything? Because it's uh,
we
I mean,
can
I'm just trying to understand because
technologically it can be enabled, Nanjunda, but
it can
in
be,
the
yeah,
world,
in at least in the blockchain sense, it does. So,
yeah, technologically
you
it
know,
can enable. And you're right. In
have
fact, we
you
were looking.
employed those things? Is what I'm just curious to.
No, we have not. In fact, we were looking at one of the things that had come about interestingly earlier, where my colleague Samik mentioned, when we do the genetic sequencing of your gut bacteria, we're looking at talking to sports people and saying that this is the this is the gut signature of the XYZ, maybe the captain of the Indian team right after he won. The World Cup or whatever.
Yeah.
So that could be, that could be what do you call crypto enabled, blockchain enabled, and bought by somebody. That is,
Well, yeah. If they
so
actually,
technologically, there is a lot of these things
yeah,
possible.
yeah.
What I'm getting to is, if I were to tell somebody that we will seek your permission every time we want to make a computation that will benefit you. I mean, it's hard enough getting people to give their approval
No,
on.
I mean, even if you have a blanket permission, at least I get a report to say that okay, my data has been tapped into 5 times this week or 50 times this week.
Yeah.
From a sense of being informed that okay, this is how uh, I'm participating. I have given the permission, and on someday, if I choose to say that okay, you please stop, but is there a possibility to stop using? I mean, that in that sense. Maybe I think this is where a lot of countries are still debating. I think India is also still debating about.
India, even from I mean, we have laid down the electronic health record laws, I think, quite some time back. And in some sense, India has been a very progressive country where we have even mentioned the structure of an electronic health record. We have not. I don't think we have left it ambiguous in that sense. Unlike other companies, even in the US, where some of these things are ambiguous, they have said exactly what all needs to be there. We haven't come to that level of. It's not proliferated yet. I mean, even hospitals today don't employ some of them. The numbers show a great amount of. But when I walk into a hospital, I don't think I'm aware that the data that the doctor is recording actually belongs to me. I mean, in fact, that's what the National Digital Health Mission's law says, right? That the medical data belongs to me. It is just being used by the hospital, and ideally the hospital should be able to transport it, or should be able to give it to somebody else. Should I give my permission? This is from the basics that I know, and I'm sure it's evolved even more. We don't have that in such a widely used system yet. We are trying to use such frameworks for what we are trying to do, but I think it's still some time away.
Right. Just want to take you one step back, where you were mentioning, I mean, jokingly rather, that about Indian captain World Cup winning moment. The gut had this bacteria at that point of time,
Yeah.
from a But
I'll tell you why
I'm just
I mentioned that. See, why I mentioned that it is also, I mean, research also says that there are certain bacteria that enhance performance. In a study done on marathoners, it has shown that the really fit athletes have presence of certain bacteria, and there's a scientific reason behind it. I won't go into it now. When, for example, if this person who's winning, it is seen that this bacteria is there, and you know that what is the set of bacteria required for that makes a winning person, both mentally and physically. It's not just that.
So how different would it be from a point of using drugs that enhances performance?
How different would be? See,
technically they should be same, right? Performance enhancement drugs should also be doing something similar. So
drugs are very different, right? I mean, drugs are categorized in very different way.
Yeah, they are categorized differently, but how different? I mean, conceptually, there is something, if triggered internally, it enhances the performance. And here you have narrowed it down to this particular bacteria. But here at a higher level, this drug perhaps may be going and triggering the same bacteria. So how different would it be? One from a moral sense, in the current sense of morality. Or do you think that should change otherwise?
From a moral standard, I don't see what you're doing is consuming food. You're improving. See, if this is the case, then you would say that I should not. I mean, there are these swimmers now, cyclists now have different gear and all that put in, right? To enhance. Runners now have different kinds of shoes. The Nike New Air and the Nike Air, whatever, says that this is owned by these people. It is allowed. There are things that are allowed.
No, but they are all external. But from an internal, see, these are all consumed internally, right? From that respect, how do you see tomorrow? Right now,
I would love it
you see this is not really considered. But do you see sometime in future that Olympic Committee will put forth that there has to be a study, whatever is the natural gut ecosystem should only be considered. If there is something unnatural, that is something induced additionally, then it should be considered. I mean, do you think that genetic study will go to the extent of saying what is the natural organism ecosystem in an athlete's gut versus something induced?
And this is all natural, right? In terms of there is nothing synthetic
about natural or synthetic, not in the context of natural and synthetic. I mean, historically being there and brought in only for this race from that sense, because usually that's what the performance enhancement drugs do, right? They don't consume it every day, but for that race they consume it. So if just before the race, if this is triggered, so how different do you see tomorrow? This could also be going in that direction.
I hope so. For the sake
would that be? But do you see that positively or negatively then?
I see it positively, partly because, like I mentioned, it's all natural, right? I mean, it's a natural ecosystem in a person, and it is something that we know. In fact, the product itself that we have says that it enhances performance in the most natural way. Like there is training of the body and the mind, everything that needs to do for an athlete to train the body. This would be a perfect example of how they need to train the body and include the other components that make you as well. We always say that the bacteria is what makes a person. In fact, the superorganism is what we say. So it definitely is not manipulation. It is a way to bring out the best in you. In fact, it is not wrong at all. My colleague actually told me to say that it is awesome. And I'd say this is probably one of the best things to do. It is enhancing yourself. And as we move to a world of super personalization, we can personalize the body to an extent that is completely feasible, that enhances every aspect of it. One of the examples that also a colleague of mine told me was that Michael Phelps has twice the lung capacity of compared to average humans. And his average consumption of nutrition is about 8,000 to 10,000 calories a day. Now, it's very different from you and I. All of this goes into it because his body needs it for the training for what's it doing. This is not manipulation. It is bringing out the best in the person's capabilities. So yes, I would say it is perfectly within the realm of permissible. And not only that, I would go to the extent of saying that it is something that everybody should do.
So, Bipin, just extending the same thing. See, your product offering is so well suited to start with, at least at this point in time. It's substantially expensive compared to the traditional method that is currently employed. Of course, this is not a apple to apple comparison. This is like a whole fruit basket versus one fruit comparison, if you have to look at it in that sense. So perhaps the pricing is justified, but from a point of affordability to the larger user base, it just doesn't fit in. Given that, why are you not focusing at something more specialized, like specifically for sportsmen and athletes, versus why are you making it something more generic? Why? I'm just curious on that. Why is that? What was the rationale behind that?
Yeah, I mean, see, so this is a go-to-market question, right? And in fact, we started with athletes. In fact, if I were to go back to our roots on how we formed this, why we did a lot of comparison. In fact, we did extensive competitive analysis of almost about 200 odd companies to create what would be our initial product. Along with that, in tandem with that, was our discussions with the top elite athletes, actually, on what can make it better for them in a natural way. And this actually came about because of them. So should we continue targeting it at only at them and not give it to the others? I do not know why we should not target the others too. In fact, as a sales channel, training centers, wellness centers are folks that we are talking to extensively and are using it for the benefit of their clientele. So it's not that we are not doing it, but we are a startup, and at least we'd like to explore, as much business as possible. If you were to tailor it even further, maybe we'll try out maybe clinical trials on certain sports and see how certain bacteria help. In fact, some bacteria, going ahead with your sports theory, there are some bacteria that are supposed to help what you call gymnasts, because it adds to the flexibility and things. There are some bacteria that helps with endurance, and therefore runners and cyclists apparently can do with some of that. There are some bacteria that help with muscular strength, and therefore weightlifters and all that.
So, Bipin, help me understand. So, what you're saying is we pretty much have all the bacteria in us, but in somebody who does long distance running, they have enhanced performance of those specific bacteria which contribute to endurance. So that could be further enhanced by the food they consume.
Let me correct that a little bit. So when you say we have all the bacteria, we have bacteria. We have some bacteria. In fact, from what we have studied, we have seen, at least in the reasons that we look at, an average of between 100 to maybe 80 to like 600, 700 different bacteria in people. Maybe there'll be more if you look even deeper. And this varies in people based on, because of their. In fact, this is the reason why microbiome science is so fascinating, right? Because if we all had the same and if we were all created equal, it wouldn't be so. And this is also where there's room for improvement. So in fact, more than the microbiome in each of us is supposed to be 80% different. Between just you and I, and including the people in your house, whereas genetically you and I, we are not even from the same geographical area, but we are supposed to be 99.9% similar. But despite that, you see huge differences, right? Where I'm going with where I'm extending this is that by what you call addressing the right bacteria for certain requirements, you can get better with your health, and you can get better with your performance too. That's the belief.
I just want to touch a little more. So, in that sense, let's take a cricket or a hockey team, right? And each one is that it is personalized. So each of the 11 members, or including the extra players, 14 players, or whatever, has to go through this exercise. So one, there is specific recommendation for each of them. One, and two, from the way the team manager composes the team in terms of their position of play, right? So certain level of aggression is required if it is batting first or batting second in the context of cricket, or in the hockey in terms of the position, whether you're playing in the front or you're in the midfielder or you're in a defender, whatever, right? So depending on what level of uh, endurance or aggression or stretchability or whatever the various other physiological traits that are essential from the performance point of view can be triggered. So it could be, the recommendations can be as specific to based on the functionality of the team at a corresponding time of composition. And the recommendations go with the food recommendations specific to it, and the food is natural diet, whatever they consume. Otherwise, but should go in this Is that how the recommendations go? Is that how it is possible if it is not done like that?
See, we are getting to different levels of complexity. Right? In fact, we don't even do the basic. In fact, if you had to talk to a cricketing team, they won't even do the first step that you mentioned in terms of allocation of team based on some of these areas that you described: skills, strengths, hydration, for that matter.
Oh no, I think not to that degree from a health point of view. So I used to have a data analytics product where we were building a prediction engine. So a team composition of the regular 11, and if a batsman is made to play at 1, what is the likelihood of the total score to the position 3 or 4? We always used to run this. I'm talking about back in 2008-9, right? And those days they were not doing it, but I'm told now people are doing it. So I think they do use a lot of this kind of data analysis, but at least from a point of who is most effective at which position against which team, even to the which ground and all that. So in the health sense, it should, maybe they are not doing it.
Let me qualify the statement better. In sense that all these are multifactorial systems. Where I'm getting to is that I don't think you should abandon those at all. The microbiome data and what it does and what it influences would be another layer of information that is used to.
But so you actually can do it to this level within the team, depending on all
but that is not the business that we are in.
Okay, but you are kind of equipped to address that.
Yes, we can give that information, and to answer some of these things further, it would require some work in terms of how it is that in one person's hydration levels in a particular temperature, in a particular geographical condition, in a particular all these are different factors that contribute to. And then you can possibly add weights to it. So in an ideal world where you get data for everything, and you can predict the movements of these data pieces. In fact, we do it strictly at a microbiome level. In fact, what we do is something called temporal modeling, where we look at data and we assign objects to the data, and then we look at, and all these objects have a movement in time. We can add to that. We can add to the more complex system that does all of this. Whether we do this entire thing and say this is your ideal team composition, no.
No, not you doing it, but depending on whatever is the composition. But if the coach or the manager says this is what I need for player A, I need enhanced support on this. For player B, so in that sense, whatever is their demand, it could be supplemented with from a point of recommendation?
Yeah, I think at a fundamental level, let's look at individuals and how we can help individuals, and then look at how individual data then go into a group. So I would say let's take it at those steps as first step and then next step, and then probably have some others in between before you get to the larger.
Right. Okay. So maybe good to go with a individual sports to then eventually the team sports from a point of contributing to the performance at a game level.
I don't know the answer to that really, because if you can influence your individual performance, you can also influence team performance, right? I mean, it's not just. I mean, just look at the mental strength.
No, I was just trying to put it in the conversational context, since you mentioned that for now you want to be you focus more at individual level. From that sense, I said, okay, maybe then individual sports and then the team sports in that context. But yeah, if you can do it for individuals, it is pretty much doable for.
There is the.
But yeah, you probably need some other systems to capture various. But I think most athletes today capture pretty much all the data, right? I think all of us are bound by these devices which generate so much of data. We are not capturing it, but somebody is capturing it. So data is technically available.
Yeah, a lot of data is available.
So how do you see this industry evolving in terms of you are able to tap into these kind of devices who are capturing various data and also integrate into your effort? Is that
really that's a great way to go? Yeah, I would see.
Is there any rules, or is there an industry body with a agreement to make such data available to at least support these kind of business?
Not that I'm aware of. In fact, why should it just be restricted to athletes? It should be given
to everybody, right?
Yeah.
So there is no such. Okay.
I'm not aware. If in case you see this or anybody who sees this comes across, I'd be happy to work with such an institution.
Yeah, in the first part of the conversation, you talked about you played roles in the government and the advocacy body for smart city, right? So if you have to look at driving this, because I think what you have taken up here is once again in the early stages, like the role you played in the smart city pretty much early on is the stage you are in this line of business also. So do you see, is there any kind of a consortium building up where you as a representative from an enterprise?
We're working on that. I've been telling we've been discussing that things like this need to be done. And see, there is multiple teams working, multiple companies, multiple universities working on all of these areas. And I'm hoping they'll all get together soon enough and put in standards. And
it's because you've actually been part of such it is like a different life for you. But are you looking at doing it, or is there somebody else doing such an effort?
Space, and we would certainly like to be involved. But as a startup right now, there are too many things.
You don't have that. Okay.
Yeah, too many things on our plate, but it needs to be done. It has, and I'm sure it will get done. These are also things which are inevitable. And pretty much like I said, when we started Iom, we knew.
So when you say needs to be done, but there is currently no such effort being done.
There is some effort by the NHS to create microbiome measurement standards. I mean, when we do measurement of microbiome, there are certain chemicals used, there are certain ingredients used.
Only that you are keeping away because of your bandwidth issue.
As of today, India does not have. It's I would say really early days in India for things like this.
So I mean, how do you see this comes up? I mean, you're waiting for government to take it up, or you're going to, or you want to give a shout out, use this platform and say, give a shout out to people to come together to do.
I'm happy to engage with folks that listen to this and give their ideas.
You actually work out of CCamp. CCamp can provide a platform for this.
CCamp can provide a platform. This I would urge them to. We'll bring it up with them and say what they can do. CCamp is a good place, actually. You should speak to CCamp and see what they can do. Yeah, thanks for putting this idea in.
So, how do you see this getting more mature? What time frame do you give for this line of business to get more mature? Which means also you attract a lot more competition in the play, because right now uh, you're operating in the gray, right? I mean, compliance follows business, and the business has to be big enough for compliance to be made.
Yes.
So, in the process, you will actually be making a lot of compliance yourself, or trying to adopt from different places just to stay in the realm. So, how far do you see from a point of uh, business defining the compliance to business following the compliance?
You know, you spoke about maturity. The Human Microbiome Project, which came about after what's called the Human Genome. The Human Genome Project announced its results somewhere in 2001. And the Human Microbiome Project that spoke about how, little more about bacteria and made the first public studies of some of these things. I think they announced their findings between 2014 and somewhere in 2014. So in that sense, it's just about 9 years since this has got mainstream attention. Historically, there's been a lot of work. I would not disagree. But if you look at an inflection point for this is when the Human Microbiome Project announced its findings. Since then, it's 9 years, right? I mean, since then, there has been so many papers published. In fact, when our team published a paper on the work in the microbiome space, and this is by going through all the articles on PubMed, we realized that almost 40,000 papers of the 100 and odd thousand papers being published in the microbiome space published in the microbiome space, almost 40,000 were published just in the last 2 years alone. So the velocity of maturity
is very near.
Is very high. And I do not know what would exactly be defined as maturity. Whether it is the number of solutions, or whether it is the number of people doing work on it, or the number of people actually getting benefited from it. I would say it's all coming together. And at least we see that in the next 3 to 4 years, there will be a lot more efforts in understanding and solving for illnesses by addressing bacteria. There are audacious goals to rule out almost all illnesses by the end of the current century. If including the microbiome in several of those instances is not part of it, I would be surprised.
So, right, I was just hoping to get you to give out some numbers. So perhaps we'll keep that for your predictions. So, so is there a shout out that you want to give to businesses who are operating in this, from a sense of trying to create some kind of a cohesive body to share data, make it available, like what we spoke earlier, right? You said you will anyway speak to CCAM, but if you want to give a shout out.
Certainly, we need collaboration in so many areas. Even we need collaboration in just getting data in terms of. I mentioned huge diversity. Now, I don't need to mention. Everybody knows about the huge diversity of India, right? Getting microbiome samples from different geographies, different people, different regions, different illnesses. So India contributes just 1.8% of the global microbiome data. if there are efforts, if we can intensify efforts to increase this. I mean, we all know India is almost 1/7 the global population, right? I mean, 1/7, 1/6, give or take. But yet we are like just 1.8% of the global microbiome data. Starting from there, in terms of shout outs for collaboration, partnerships, standardization, regulation, so to say, all of that, we are in early days. And any help is welcome. Any and all help is welcome. In all forms, actually, whether it is just people coming in and contributing, whether it is technological support, whether it is support for data analysis, whether it is support from hospitals to say, let's look at how these conditions can be impacted, or both from an observational study or an intervention study. So yeah, across the spectrum, I think there is shout out to support.
Oh, Bipin, I was just thinking before closing, do you want to give a shout out to medical professionals, doctors and hospitals, as how not to look at you as a threat?
Oh, yes, certainly. We are not a threat in any way. And when I say we, I don't mean me or Iom or even the space. I would say the space is what would be the right word? Is not competitive. It is collaborative, and that's how bacteria are. To go with right from the beginning. If you look at, and I'm talking about this from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah. No, but many would look at you as a threat, right? From a point of you trying to guide them through first give them their own understanding of it, and two, how their own natural food intake itself can address a lot of these things. So from that respect, if you can address whatever is the sense of
anything you've seen as a
insecurity.
If you look at it, right now, even many folks see AI as a threat, but many folks also see AI as helpful and contributing and supporting. I would put this in the same space. Anything new is a threat until people realize the value that they derive from it. Some of us have seen value earlier, which time will say how much it is complementary to what everybody does, and it becomes, like I said, inevitable in I would say that like how AI is, and I'm only using AI because it's new. It is inevitable. I don't see how you cannot do medical science or healthcare. Healthcare without addressing the microbiome. It's either us and several companies like us that will do it, or it will become integrated into the mainstream piece using technology and other frameworks, tools that are getting built.
Right. And all those who want to reach out either to collaborate or dig more, or even perhaps have an argument to make with Bipin, is very responsive. So the links are right below this podcast. Feel free to reach out and also follow the work they're doing. And thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did in bringing this to you. And share this across with everybody you think who appreciate it. And also, if you're not yet followed Future Fast, do it right now. And once again, Bipin, thank you so much for doing this, spending time with us as well.
Thank you, Rajendra. All your questions have been quite thoughtful, thought-provoking, let me put it that way, in shaping not only what we do, but how we can leverage the larger set of people to do, cooperate, collaborate, participate, all of that. My own thinking. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.